Good morning, friends. Hello there, hello, hello. Hi. Hey, good morning, Amy. How are you, gang? Hi, Vicky. Good morning. John, good morning. Bob Guinan, good morning to you. Oh, Vicky, I'm sorry to hear you're still sick. That's too bad. Oh. Oh, it's so that admin is a little more than chocolates this morning. No, it's waiting for chocolates. That's what it is. So, no, that's great. Love it. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good to see you. Good morning, Donna. Glad you're here. Glad you're well. Still holding you in our prayers, Donna. Hope that you have some peace in these days as you're getting ready for. Good morning, good morning. Hello. Good to see you, everybody. All right. We are getting there. All right. Good morning, everybody. It is the first day of December. We are into it now, friends. It is the first day of December on 2021, this Wednesday morning. Welcome to you. We are preparing here for a memorial of one of our dear ones, Ruth Williams. So, if you are of this group and praying, please do hold a prayer for the Williams family and for them. And welcome for all that this day has brought you. I want to revisit one of these lines of Bible that seem to be just almost so ubiquitous we almost take it for granted. We think we know what it means, or we think we know what its instruction is. But I want to invite you to maybe see it a little different. And it's this line from the Beatitudes. It is Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. This notion of the meek, and I've talked about this before, but I want to talk about it a little different way about it, is that, and this is this idea that, somehow we need to simply bring our battles or fight our battles in such a way that we don't we are compliant or we're nice. The whole kind of spiritual idea of being nice, and that how we often might even spiritualize our hurts away, or our desires, or our wants, or even our call from God. We might spiritualize it away in some way because we're just trying to be nice. We're trying to be meek because we will inherit the earth. And I want to submit to you that this meekness is, now I know I've shared this before, that the definition of that, the flavor that's kind of behind that idea is this notion that it is as a person who could draw a sword but chooses not to. Like that's the invitation in meekness. That's kind of the understanding behind it. But I want to consider it even more, that there's a way of life that I think we're, particularly as good Americans, and particularly in these days when maybe you're struggling with something, maybe there's something hard going on in your life, or maybe just being in the world is hard, and you're contending with something. Whatever it is, we're given this idea that we've got to go get it. We've got to go attack. We have to go kind of wrestle down the alligators of our lives. And it's not to say there aren't moments where that is true. But one of the great military historians that ever lived, a guy by the name of B.H. Liddell Hart, it's a great British name. Well, Liddell Hart did he was a great studier of strategy. And he studied 280 different campaigns throughout history, all different times, and not particular battles, but the whole campaigns, and that those who were victorious in those campaigns, from the ancient world all the way to modern combat, of the 280 campaigns that he looked at, of that, 2% of those campaigns, 6 in fact, 2% of those campaigns were successful as a result of a direct assault but from one army onto another. I want you to hear that. That in all of the history of warfare, which we imagine is really this one series, if there could be no greater way of attacking, right? Like no greater idea than attack than the kind of the full frontal assault, which is what we always imagine is that which carries the day. That great King Hal moment of once more unto the breach, dear friends, and let us pilot high with these our English dead. That these moments where we've got to storm the breach of the castle. What Hart discovers in his research is that actually that's not true at all. That actually successful military campaigns are really much more about flanking maneuvers. They're much more about fighting withdrawals. They're much more about ways in which the maneuver of armies and the placement of places. That in fact it's about finding the weak points to finding the right terrain in which to fight. Numerous other things. Far more about maneuver. Far more about where you are when you are. Far more about, getting there firstest with the mostest, as the old generals used to say, than this assault across no man's land. I think way too often in the spiritual world, we think we have to take on all the devils. We have to take on all the dragons. We have to. We look at and part of it's this idea that we have to maybe be perfect a little bit, but way before we have to be perfect, we have to be meek. We have to be smart. We have to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And so, if there are things that are afflicting you, if there are things that are that you're contending with, and I think on a real spiritual level, like I think Liddell Hart's notion is as valid in our spiritual warfare as it is in human earthly warfare. That if we go running at every problem that we have, and I'm not even just saying problem, but every opposition, if we're depressed, and all we do is stare at our depression, like, oh, I've got to be better than I feel awful. I have to be. If we're afflicted in that way, if we're angry and we just have to, like, no, I can never be angry again. That's it. Well, our absolute, over the top direct assault on our anger. I shall banish my anger to the outer reaches, into the outer darkness. It doesn't work. It's not successful, and in fact, we end up creating conditions where we put ourselves into a defeat mode. I want to invite you that really, that part of what Jesus is talking about when he's talking about, and he uses a lot of little analogies like this, and as wise as serpents and gentle as doves, that these ways in which to love our enemies, that all of these are in some ways they're hacks. They're ways of us winning in spiritual in the warfare of our soul, in the warfare of our world, that isn't about kind of once more unto the breach. It isn't about going over the top and crushing our enemies in front of us. It's not the Conan barbarian idea of spiritual warfare, but quite the opposite. Kierkegaard was probably one of the great. He's called a philosopher, but he's really a Christian apologist. I kind of refuse to call him a philosopher, even though he dwelt in philosophy. He worked in philosophy, but he was really he was a deep Christian in everything that he wrote. But he was a great Christian apologist, meaning that the art of being an apologist is the idea of kind of explaining or combating or winning arguments. And he would do all kinds of stuff. He would not simply like make truth claims like, Jesus is Lord. Well, that's great. That's awesome. Like, nobody cares. That if that's not an authority for you, if that's not something that makes sense to you, then it's not something that it's not necessarily a winning argument. But he would write articles under surnames. He would, and some of them would be incredibly impassioned. They would be just a ploy to the emotion. And some he would write that were just incredibly logical and beautifully thought out treatises. Some he would write, and often he would write them not under his own name, but under pen names, and that he would set this up for either his classes as a teacher or as churches that he was working with, or other people, so that they would get these myriad of voices. They would be flanked by these arguments, whether it was an argument to the heart or to the head or to logic. He didn't simply bash his head or against the means of rhetoric. But he simply invited people and outflanked them again and again and again in these beautiful ways of making his case without ever going on the attack, as one of my old spiritual mentors used to say. He says the first thing about shucking oysters is the oyster has to want to be shucked, and that much of spiritual work is about people who are willing to open up, and that. So I tell you that to just give you another example of this notion of if we really want to inherit the earth, the flank attack, the battle of maneuver, the resistance to taking the bait. This is another thing. The resistance to taking the bait of argument and of fighting in this world. It doesn't matter what you believe these days, but we can blast anything onto social media and we can create all manner of havoc in terms of what the and attacks on the world and all this, and these full frontal assaults just don't convince anybody. They just don't. And maybe their goal isn't to convince anybody. Maybe they're just to be declarative. But even in the declaration, they're polarizing to the very world around us. That if we want to inherit the earth, there's this way of being meek. There's this way of using these flank attacks. And I'm not just saying about like convincing other people of our positions. I'm talking about our own souls. That if we put ourselves up against all of our dragons, there's way too many dragons. That we are far more enticed to be meek about our spiritual journey, to fight in the right place at the right time with the right things about the right things and gain that ground. Because this is the thing, is that, and I've said this before, but it's one of the spiritual truths I love to come back to because it's so important, that we don't have to win all the victories because the victories have already been won. We don't have to win all our whole soul back for Christ because Christ has already won our whole soul. Our job is simply to occupy this space, to let us hold it for the one who's given it to us, to be a part of it, and that when we do that, when we rout one small band, we rout the entire army. You know, one of my spiritual mentors likes to say, you know, when we move one thing, God moves 1,000 things. But the movement of the one thing is really critical. It's really important because it's this way in which we claim the ground in which Christ has won. In which we claim the victory in which has been declared. We step into in meekness, in the battle of maneuver, not in the clash of swords. The spiritual victory and the spiritual war is won. So, friends, I want to invite you, kind of as we kind of stay with that metaphor, to maybe take the long way around. You know, if it requires you to make a hard march, then make the hard march. If it requires of you to bite a tongue, then bite the tongue. If it requires of you something deeper and climbing what everybody thought was impassable, then be the Hannibal and climb the Alps of your own soul. That rather than keep throwing yourselves at the things that would destroy you, keep trying, you know, just one more time and I'll get it right. Just one more time and everything will be okay. Just one more time and all the that my devils will be banished. It's never the case. It's never the case. That's not, friends, how wars are won. It's not how our hearts are won. It's not how our internal geography are won. It's not how the world is won. That Jesus' invitation that if we want to inherit the earth, we embrace our meekness. Knowing we could absolutely draw our sword and bash somebody in the head with our argument, or bash ourselves enough times, thinking that if we just bash ourselves enough times, we'll get it right. If we just bash ourselves enough times, we won't eat the brownies. If we won't bash ourselves enough times, we won't drink the drink. If we bash ourselves enough times, we won't feel bad. If we bash ourselves enough times, we'll get out of bed. It doesn't work. And it's not God's promise for us. It's not. God's promise for us is the whole world. I want you to inherit the whole world, says Christ Jesus. I want to give you the whole world. But step into it with meekness. Don't draw your sword and bash everybody over the head. But maneuver and flank and hold the good ground. Make the hard march. It's actually harder. It's harder. It's easier to bash yourself. It's easier to bash the world. It's actually a great spiritual temptation. The spiritual fathers talk about it. But stand in the land of victory that has already been won and claim that space. Claim that ground. If the devils attack, let them come. For you are victorious in Christ Jesus. All right, friends. It's my hope for you today in that you will hold on to a bit of that. We are going to wish our dear sister Ruth well at 1 o'clock this afternoon. We have for those of you who are part of the church, we have a council meeting tonight, and then we have coming up this week and this weekend we will this Sunday we will have communion and the opportunity to gather in worship. So much more to come, and we'll come back tomorrow with another 11:11. Peace and grace, friends.